after it was reported that there's an audio recording of Donald Trump casually using the N-word. A former Trump associate confirmed the story, and there's leaked audio of the Trump campaign desperately strategizing ways to spin it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video. This is bombshell news, which was reported earlier today about Donald Trump's racism. Apparently, the person in question who recorded the audio file was a former producer on The Apprentice. He signed an NDA. The NDA is expiring, so there's a pretty good chance that the file will be released. But the story was also confirmed by a former Trump associate, Omarosa. We're going to play this clip and some others, and then use it to contrast a recent speech made by President Biden in which he touts his historic achievements on behalf of and for the black community.
What you describe in your book is a year-long effort to learn the truth about a rumor that Donald Trump had been caught on tape using the N-word while working on The Apprentice. And here's how you wrote about confirming with a source that the tape does in fact exist. Page 322 of your book. On this phone conversation, I was told exactly what Donald Trump said. Yes, the N-word and others in a classic Trump goes nuclear rant. And when he'd said them, during production he was mic'd, and there's definitely an audio track. For over a year, I'd been so afraid of hearing the specifics from someone who'd been in the room. Hearing the truth freed me from that fear. Did you hear the tape, or did you hear a description of the tape?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And in this book, I describe this long journey of hearing these rumors over and over again. And when I had an opportunity to meet up with 3 different sources, they describe the same exact statements. After I closed the book, I had an opportunity to go out in Los Angeles and sit down with the person who actually has a copy of the tape. And I heard his voice as clear as you and I are sitting here.
You have heard the tape?
I have heard
since
the
publication
tape.
Of this book?
Absolutely.
So you know it exists?
And I know it exists. And what I regret is that these people are probably trying to leverage it as this October surprise. I don't want to be a part of that. But I have heard for 2 years that it existed. And once I heard it for myself, it was confirmed what I feared the most, that Donald Trump is a con and has been masquerading as someone who is actually open to engaging with diverse communities. But when he talks that way, the way he did on this tape, it confirmed that he is truly a racist.
Well, I mean, there you have it. Confirmation from a former Trump employee and associate. And if that wasn't bad enough, then you also have leaked audio of members of the Trump campaign apparently taking this quite seriously, suggesting that the tape is real as far as they're concerned, and they're trying to figure out ways how to spin it as the election draws nearer.
I'm trying to find out at least what context it was used in to help us maybe try to figure out a way to spin it. I said, well, sir, can you think of any time that this might have happened? And he said no.
Well, that's not true.
He goes, how do you think I should handle it? And I told him exactly what you just said, Omarosa, which is, well, it depends on what scenario you're talking about. And he said, well, why don't you just go ahead and put it to bed? I don't know what the scandal is. No, he said it.
So again, you have Katrina Pearson, a Trump campaign official, confirming that Donald Trump did indeed say it, even though he reflexively, impulsively lies. Now, of course, you know, Omarosa points out that this could be used for cynical purposes as an October surprise, to which I have to say, who cares, right? I will remind you that in 2020, October 2020, Rudy Giuliani and Trump's advisors attempted to use, the so-called Hunter Biden laptop as an October surprise against then candidate Joe Biden. October surprises are cynical political weapons. They're used more often than not by Republicans. And unlike that, in this case, if true, and again, it appears to be given the layers of confirmation from a former Trump associate and a current Trump campaign advisor, not only is it true, it's actually Trump himself, not a Trump family member, not Jared Kushner, not Ivanka, not Don Jr., not Eric, but the candidate himself who has done the misdeed. So I am all for Democrats making hay of this and making sure that the American people are inundated in this tape if it exists. No sympathies whatsoever. And if Republicans don't like it, then perhaps they should play politics much more altruistically. But of course they don't. So I'm really not interested in hearing people complain about it. Now, in contrast, That's one candidate. The other candidate, President Biden, the incumbent, has actually taken steps on behalf of the black community and for the black community in terms of what he's done legislatively and executively. I'm going to play a couple of clips here which kind of emphasize some of the major historic gains and achievements of the Biden administration on this score.
In addition to that, I thought that President Biden was pitch perfect. He talked about his story arc. He talked about the last words that his son, Beau Biden, had before he passed to him. But he also talked about the strength of Morehouse, the strength of HBCUs, the strength of looking at those young people in that audience who will go on to possibly be a Supreme Court judge later. He talked about, somebody who may be vice president later. They currently already have a vice president who's an HBCU grad, but also gave a message of hope to these students and reminded them of all of the things that this president has done to improve the black community, whether it was technological advancement and providing for areas that previously did not have things like Wi-Fi, whether it was the expansion of healthcare and healthcare assistance for many people who did not have it before, the sizable student loan debt that he was able to grant towards people who the Republican side of the aisle tried to deny multiple times over and the Supreme Court shot down. He talked about a lot of the initiatives that he's done to rebuild the economy for black people, small business ownership, the importance of increased HBCU funding, specifically to make sure that the historic underfunding that they've had for generations is that gap is closed, but moreover, that they invest in science, technology, all of these things that allow for black grads from HBCUs to be able to go out.
I mean, we're going to play some clips from President Biden himself, but again, that sounds a heck of a lot more impressive than things that Trump touts when he's not using, of course, the N-word. He's talking about how under his watch or on his watch, there was historic black unemployment, even though President Biden has actually lapped those figures. Trump also talks about, historic HBCU funding, and so do his surrogates like Republican Senator Tim Scott, even though HBCU funding, historically black colleges and universities, have been funded to a far greater extent under the Biden-Harris administration. And as a matter of fact, the funding that HBCUs got under Donald Trump were because of black congresspeople, not because of Trump himself. Trump wanted to zero it out. But now that happened despite him, he's trying to take credit for it. So the whole thing is just super gross. But again, I want to play some clips here of President Biden recently speaking in Philadelphia. We're not going to go through the stuff that was previously listed. It would be redundant, but also to talk about particularly black appointments and unemployment. We'll start with this one here.
Folks, Trump continues to lie by saying black unemployment was at a record low on his watch. The fact is, record low unemployment happened on my watch, and we're going to keep it going. Black small businesses are starting up at a faster rate in 30 years because of what we've done. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years because of our efforts. A promise made and a promise kept.
That's the theme of the speech in Philadelphia. Promise made, promise kept. Couple of other clips here.
Because you voted, I was able to keep my commitment to appoint the first black woman on the United States Supreme Court. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. A promise made and a promise kept, and I appointed more black women to the federal circuit courts than every other president in American history combined. Every single president combined. And overall, we appointed 200 black judges to the federal bench. And guess what? The next president, they're going to be able to appoint a couple justices, and I'll be damned if they're not going to have it.
Again, important to point that out as well, that the number of number one, the fact that he was able to appoint Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black woman to the United States Supreme Court, an enormously credentialed and experienced and accomplished jurist, compared to somebody like Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was appointed, the final justice appointed by Donald Trump in 2020. The contrast in pedigree, the contrast in competence could not be clearer. Listen to any of the Supreme Court oral arguments, and KGB just laps. She just laps the conservative justices on the court, or KGB. She laps the justices on the court appointed by Donald Trump, and also by the veteran conservative justices like Alito and Thomas. I mean, the fact of the matter is, this will be a great pivot point for the Biden campaign to illustrate the stark contrast between Donald Trump and President Biden with respect to, minority group outreach to the black community. I mean, I hear all the time, I've actually heard it from close friends of mine, unfortunately, who are under the impression that Donald Trump is actually winning, votes and support from minority groups in this country, when the reality is, even now, black Americans tend to favor Democrats, tend to favor President Biden. And it's stuff like this which illustrates why. Donald Trump, he's the man of just casually using the N-word and then trying to conceal it and then trying to spin it. President Biden's the man of historic funding for HBCUs, historically low black unemployment, and a historic record-breaking number of black Americans appointed to the federal bench, including the highest bench in the federal judiciary of them all, the United States Supreme Court. So hopefully the Biden campaign will use this story to further illustrate the stark differences between the two presidential candidates. But we'll see what happens, because at the time of recording, apparently Donald Trump's Manhattan jury has come back with a verdict. So that story may overshadow this one, but both, I think, will be very important for the Biden campaign moving forward. Let me know what you think in the comments.